the one thing you'll always have in life is your brain. And it's the most powerful tool you have, but no one really understands it. No one knows anything about it. No one knows much about emotions, at least intentionally. It's just fascinating seeing, the places you can go and the things you can think of. You're introspective. And there's a lot of different paths to get there.
Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast, bringing forth the new wave of rising leadership and helping leaders find purpose, connection, and results. This is your host, founder of Alluviance, Alex Kremer. All right. Welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast. I am so grateful that you are here. This is your host, Alex Kremer. We have a good show today with a guest by the name of Lee Rodgers. Before I dive into Lee, what up, man? It's good to see you.
How's it going, man? It's good.
Lee and I got connected, probably like 4 or 5 months ago, something along those lines. And he is making a splash in the world of leadership, in the world of sales, also really a pioneer in the world of mental health as well, in terms of how he is supporting him as well as the people that work for him. So I am really excited. To be honest, Lee, I'm just excited to pick your brain and learn from you. I don't even care about what the listeners think. I just want to learn from you on this show here, man. So a little bit about you, Lee. I'll give an intro and then, feel free to fill in the gaps where I might miss. So Lee is the CEO and co-founder of Sift. Sift is a platform that gives revenue leaders and reps a single place to do their research, to prioritize their accounts, to organize and collaborate on their territory and generate value messaging. And oh, by the way, when they're doing all this in one application, they can automate the most critical part, which is the value messaging. So we will dive a little bit more into what Sift actually does, I'm assuming, throughout this conversation. Besides that, Lee, you used to work at both Workday as well as Oracle. So you got some big enterprise type company experience. You live in the beautiful city of Austin, Texas. I think you were born and raised within Texas as well. So that is the main gist that all my research, through our conversations, through talking to all of our mutuals, that I know about you. Lee, what did I miss within that statement right there, that opening?
That was about it, man. You have the Sift messaging down. That's interesting. It's been a while since we talked, and you nailed it. Remind me, where do you live again? I forget. Where are you based?
I am here in New York City. Yeah, I'm right in the heart of Manhattan, in Greenwich Village.
Right. Yeah, I need to make it up there. I haven't actually. Sift is sponsoring an event up there in the next month or so. So it'll be interesting. It'll be fun. Our one of my co-founders, Zach, is going up there, and he's all excited. He handles sales for us, so he's a good dude. I've actually known him since I was 6, so it's kind of fun to go through that with him.
The fact that you have known somebody since 6 years old and are now starting a company together is, I think, not a common history or background, and I'm assuming that helps you guys quite a bit. But we're going to get to that here in a second. So here's what I want to do first. One unique trait or skill set about you, Lee, that I have learned is that you are a self-learner. And when I say self-learner, you have self-taught how to code. You are self-taught on how to play the piano, and you are self-taught on how to speak Korean. So those are just some very unique facts about you. How does one even go about self-teaching themselves how to do all those things? Are you good at it now, or just like, is this part of just your DNA and your competitive edge?
Yeah, I am, and I wouldn't say I'm good at all those things, but definitely interested. I don't know. I think learning is something that is I'm just passionate about that. I'm really curious about the world, and kind of always have something I'm trying to learn, or a skill I'm trying to build. So that's just kind of something I've always been interested in doing. And so I don't know. What's crazy is there's so many tools out there nowadays that the barriers to entry to learning anything is so low, and I think that's something that I kind of love about the world today, which is really cool. I like that a lot, but definitely not an expert, especially Koreans. I'm working on that one still. So I'm not gonna be in Seoul anytime soon. Just navigating around, speaking fluent with everyone, but still in the process on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is a powerful just skill set to have. I personally am not the type of person who's self-taught. For me, like even I'm not a fan of going to the gym by myself just to work out myself like that. Usually, I'm not saying I'm bad at that, but what I do love is I love being in community with other people as we are learning about a topic. So, communities about sales, communities about leadership, even my workout classes today, whether it be F45 or berries or Rumble, anything along those lines, that I'm doing it with other people. That at least is one of the places where I find the most fulfillment. So I think it's unique, and that you have to be able to self-teach. I mean, do you have a strategy about how to do it, or did you just get like, I want to learn everything about coding and just watch YouTubes, read books, all that? Or do you have something,
Yeah.
special technique?
Yeah, for me, I don't know if I have a strategy. I think it just starts with being genuinely interested in something. For coding, like I went to medical school for a while, and was always pretty fascinated with, I guess, like sciencey and STEM things in general. But when I kind of started coding, neural networks were, I guess, making their comeback. So I was just really curious on the underlying code and architecture on how all of that worked. So that was actually the reason I started coding, and then I started building neural networks back before that. Cool frameworks like TensorFlow and Keras and all of that existed, kind of hard coding the linear algebra. So it was a really good learning experience and understanding the technology, but that's kind of where it starts. I think, even, when you're self-taught things, I think you get to a point to where you eventually, bridge in to start having some kind of community or find some kind of mentors that can help you. Like, for example, piano, I was self-taught there for a while, but eventually it gets to a point where, if you're into piano, like your form can actually start to really hurt you on even your ability to play certain songs, and then, hurt your actual, hands and forearms, and you start getting injuries and stuff. So it came to a point where I'd kind of reached the end of where I could get on my own. So then I, went out and got an instructor and got a little bit more help there, which kind of bridges you into the community piece. But I feel like for me, it kind of starts, just with interest and building from there, and then, going from there.
I love that. I love it's the initial, peaking of the interest that then you start doing it. You're probably really bad at it, and you get a little bit better to the point where then it's time to go and find mentorship or community within it.
Yeah, some of the people that were close to me when I was first learning piano had to had probably bleeding ears for a little while, and they heard the same piece over and over again. So,
God, I still remember in college, I had a very good friend. He was also named Alex, and he would stay up late at night until 3 a.m. playing piano, where everybody else is trying to sleep. And I lived right above that floor where he was playing it.
Oh man, that reminds me. Yeah, when I was first learning to code, I was actually, after medical school, I was working at Oracle. I first got in there. I was on the lead gen team, but there's not a lot of time, when you're working full time and, you want to work out or, be somewhat social after work. There's not a lot of time to go learn new things, especially intensive things like coding. So I would get up at like 5 a.m. every morning. At the time, Zach and I were actually living in the same place. And I love smoothies in the morning, and I have this like totally ridiculous, I don't even know, it's a Ninja, and it's like 1,000 horsepower or something. Anyways, it like shakes the house when it runs. It's like so loud. And I felt bad because Zach, would be sleeping. It's 5 a.m. So I'd get my little smoothie maker, go and carry it into the closet and run it in there. So I don't know. It's just, there definitely are some people that have to work with you and be okay with some of the things you're doing. So.
Mm-hmm. So I want to, kind of tie into just how you've gotten to where you are today. I mean, being, the co-founder and CEO of a tech company is by no means an easy feat, and the path to get there is really hard. I would say it's probably one of the more challenging things that people can choose to do within their lives. And, really just, take me back to the beginning, even before you were CEO, even before you're like, where does it start of like what your unique path is? I mean, you mentioned that you went to medical school as well. Where does it start, the journey for you that has led you to, being where you are and caring about what you care about?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I feel like there was a point to, I don't know, when you're growing up, there's, always kind of some kind of perception or some kind of, I don't know, role you start to settle into, as a function of your community or your upbringing or whatever it might be. And for me, I happened to be pretty good at football growing up, and I grew up in the Katy area. And so that was kind of like the role or a big part of my life growing up. And then eventually I played football at A&M. Played might be a little bit of a stretch, but I was on the team. And then at some point, I kind of realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do, and I, wasn't big enough to go pro. So I didn't have that incentive. But I think maybe it's there. I kind of realized, and like you take ownership of the decisions you have in your own life, and that that the only limit, and this kind of gets into the mental health stuff that I know you and I are both nerds on, but the only limit is really what you can think of, right? And frankly, most people I feel like or when you feel like you're trapped, or you feel like you can't do a certain thing, or there's still limitations, what it really is, it's like a mental box, right? You're kind of putting yourself in your own mental box, and you're the only one who's not allowing you to go do whatever it is. So I think when I decided to stop playing football, that was kind of a moment for me where I really started to feel that way. And from there, it's kind of like just exploring the world and, being genuinely curious and learning things. And then the concept of when I was in kind of, corporate America, or so to speak, I've always liked to be able to do things like what I love. And this is what I love about, a startup, and probably what drove me to want to start my own company, was just the only limitation you have is your brain and what you can think of. And I love that ability to do things differently, or to build whatever you want to build. I think that's the really cool thing, something I'm passionate about. And giving yourself the space to be creative and do that. I think I have an underlying drive to do that, which I think shaped my direction into wanting to kind of do my own thing and start my own company.
The only limitation you have is your brain and what you can think of. That's a really powerful statement right there. So what does that mean to you? I mean, would you say that you in your life have battled with certain types of limitations? And I did that with this frame. I have found that through my journey, the limitations or the beliefs I had, the limiting beliefs that I had, have groomed me and shaped me into the version of myself that I am, right? It's like the challenges and the times where I felt the worst or the struggling the most. I mean, I even look back to, certain, days in my early years of college when I really struggled mentally. Nobody would know it, but I struggled when I was early in my college years. And, shortly after, college, when I moved to San Francisco, were some of my hardest years of my life. And then, moving out to New York City and starting a new life out here, have certain days have been very limiting of like, who am I? What am I even doing? Am I good enough for any of this? Yeah. I have found that it was these limiting beliefs, or these limitations, that once I was truly able to be with them and to sit with them and to just allow those things to, not try to push it away, but also just try to be like, hey, this is just a part of me. It's become part of my competitive edge. It's become part of, one of my unique things about myself. So I'd be curious to know from you, what are some of those limiting beliefs, those limitations that you set for yourself that you've had to overcome?
Yeah. And Well, there's two things there. I think that the first is, I feel like when people are deeply introspective or start to really be interested in mental health and it becomes a big part of their life, I kind of feel like there's two ways to get there, which I'm sure there's a million more, but two main ways that kind of come to mind for me. But one is, um, you have someone that I guess is impactful or really helps show you how to be that or helps guide you into that manner of thinking. Um, and then the other way, which sounds like was kind of the path maybe you took and then the path I had, but there's some kind of event or some kind of thing you struggled with or some kind of pain that kind of forced you in that direction. And so I think that's kind of the something that, and that's part of why I became so passionate about mental health. Because I think what you said earlier is, nobody would know it, right? That you're struggling with these things. I think a lot of times top performers are that way, right? It's easy to present the front, especially when you're a skilled person like yourself. It's easy to present the perfect front, even though you might be struggling with things internally. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the way I think about it. And I kind of wish that people in general or mental health or psychology was taught even earlier in school. It's like the one thing you'll always have in life is your brain, right? And it's the most powerful tool you have, but no one really understands it. No one knows anything about it. No one knows much about emotions, at least intentionally. Yeah, I don't know. It's just fascinating seeing the places you can go and the things you can think of, if you're introspective. And there's a lot of different paths to get there. But yeah.
It is very true. I mean, I would totally wish that I could go back to middle school or high school, even elementary, then teaching me some sort of psychology, some sort of mental health stuff. I don't even think that mental health was that talked about until recently. I probably,
Right.
The whole mental health thing came out when Michael Phelps, was struggling. And that really set the trajectory of like, hey guys, this is a thing. Our best and shining athlete, good looking guy, strong, has it all, is struggling. And all of a sudden more people started to come out. And yeah, mental health is, personally, I struggle with mental health every day. I mean, it's something that it's always there. On certain days I can feel great and certain days I can feel terrible. But knowing that, and depression or, anxiety or whatever it is, it really runs in my family, and whether it be, sisters, parents, aunts, uncles, you name it, like it's prevalent there. And the thing that I've always felt is the best way to be with your mental health is through the art of meditation, through the art of breath work, through the art of journaling, exercise. And, at least for me personally, one of the most important ways that I, support my mental health is through my spirituality, my relationship with God, and really feeling like I'm serving something greater, because I feel like so often when I feel myself at my lowest, even I look back to 3 months ago, I was at just like a tough moment. And, it was because it was all about me. It was all about, well, what do people think about me? How am I showing up? I'm not enough. And it really, I lost sight of what's the greater thing that I'm serving that's beyond just myself.
Right.
So that's at least my perspective on, mental health is a great asset to use to work to figure out to not be in a certain place.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, I hear you and feel you on, sometimes I feel like, genetics plays a big role in that. And, sometimes you don't always win the genetic lottery on some of those things, but I think it really can be and I think you said this earlier, it's something that ultimately, if you approach it the right way and you can work with it, it can be, I think, a differentiator or something that's really helpful in your life, right? Both personally and professionally. I think that the way you think about things and connect with people can be different. and that was, I think, what really turned me on to mental health in general. Is I'm interesting. I've been a very kind of fact-based, like, science person. I'm like, when you hear something said, it's like, I'm not an annoying person. Like, well, show me the data that supports it. And so I was kind of going through this, and I hadn't spent a lot of time or didn't know a ton on kind of, Eastern-based religions, things, meditation. And so I started looking into that more, and I found that, people have been, studying, some of the Buddhist monks, for example, and when they're meditating, doing some things, they're actually, changing their brain patterns. Like, you can physically see that their brains are making neural pathways that, weren't there before. So then I started getting fascinated, like, oh my God, there's like, hard, biological changes that are happening here. And so I really started diving into it. And I ultimately get to today, I'm kind of like a combination of, like, I take some of the, Eastern practices and, superimpose that with some of the Western psychology. I guess that's probably a relatively naive way to state that, but it's an interesting combination of kind of the, emotional and logical. And when that meets, I think, like, that's where I got really fascinated with it. And when you start to view the world with that lens, I think it's really helpful in a lot of different aspects. Although, to my earlier point, getting there sometimes isn't always the greatest.
It is very interesting that we do have the ability to change it. We do have the ability to change the synapses and the neural pathways that we have in our brain to be, reestablished. I still remember one time in New York, I went to this incredible art exhibit, and you walk in and it's just like essentially light shows on, all the walls, floors, ceilings about the brain starting from the very beginning, cell to then just like growing and getting memories and getting, beliefs and learning different things. It's really an incredible organism that I think you said earlier, it could be a massive value add. Obviously, it keeps us, living and breathing. And man, it can get infested. Like, there can get tough energies that are on it that you're just like, you wake up and you're like, dude, what is this? Is this me? Is this on me, or is this like a different spirit or demon that's somehow gotten into my system and is, taking over? And, how we go about keeping our brain clean. One thing that I do is something called network care chiropractic. And essentially, it's a form of chiropractic that feels like voodoo, like straight up, it feels like voodoo. You sit on like this massage table on your belly, and the chiropractor comes over and he like touches different parts of your spine and of your neck. And literally you start to feel like he's not poking it or anything, like pinching it. He's just like playing with the energy above it. And you literally start to feel your spine and your neck and your tailbone and your heart like start to like move, because we've held up these different stresses, these different anxieties, these experiences, traumas in our spine in different types of ways that cause them to clench and stay in that state. And the whole purpose of doing this is to go in there and to release that energy and to allow that like current coming from, your brain down through your body and all the way back up again, and to free that up. And yeah, that's one way that I go about hopefully changing my brain synapses by checking my spine first.
By getting a massage, but not massage.
It's definitely not a massage.
No, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that. But yeah, it is fascinating how like a purely mental construct can have physical impacts, even on the body, to your point. Like if you're stressed out, but you carry tension in your shoulders because of it, or, wherever it might be. So yeah, I hear that. It's good. I think everyone has something like slightly different that works for them too. So it sounds like you have a couple that you go to. And so I think that's important. I think it starts with just the general awareness that you are experiencing a certain thing, right? Like you need to go, do that form of, I'll call it stress release or something, to put it very simplistic, but that's because you were aware of it first, right? I think it's in some senses even hard to be aware of, which is, in some aspects, mental health and the upkeep of it can be challenging in itself, even if you are aware of it. But if you're not, that's obviously you can't manage what you can't see, right? So there's that aspect. And then even if you are aware of it, it's kind of, I think you said this earlier too, it can be a daily battle, right? And but it is also a choice, right? You can kind of stay trapped there, or you can kind of choose, hey, I'm not going to identify with this pain or with this issue, and work to change it, even though sometimes it can be frustrating that you even have to do that, right? And it can be hard to really get back to the fact that you realize you do have a choice with it. But yeah, so it's good that you have a couple different ways that you can deal with it and work through it.
Well, it's hard to detach though from, the feeling or the emotion of it. And I'd love to understand what you do yourself to support your mental health journey. But, I'll first say that when I feel, just whether it be sadness or I feel anger, or I feel insecurity come up, the naming of it is really important. And one of the ways I say it, and I was taught this through parts work, and saying, hey, I don't feel sad. I say, there's a part of me that feels sad. And it prevents yourself from brainwashing yourself just to identify completely with, I am sadness.
Right.
Like, no, you are not sadness. There's a part of you that feels sad. And that part could either be sad from something that just happened, or there's a part that happened from something, 15 years ago.
Right.
And I still haven't healed or grieved or released that. And so I hold that up, and that comes out and it lashes out. And, I used to be somebody who, when people would ask, hey, how are you, Alex? I used to say, I'm always awesome. I'm always awesome. I used to say that over and over again. I thought it was so cool saying that, because, I always thought too, so it's like, number one, if I say that, they're going to feel a little bit more awesome because they're going to feel my vibe. And number two, hopefully the word awesome will go in my ear and brainwash myself into thinking I am doing awesome. And there's value in that, especially when you need to show up when you're not feeling super awesome. But it's also incredibly unhealthy, because it's pushing down these like deep rooted feelings of, actually, I'm pretty fucked up. I'm not super stoked. And you're lying to yourself. And then that causes one to be out of rapport with themselves, and, not whole, or putting on a projection and hiding the shadow. And that, there's a whole lot that comes from that. So
how you talk to yourself is really important. I feel like earlier when you're saying like essentially label your own emotions and how you're feeling. And yeah, I've read like so many books on mental health and, psychology and happiness in general. It's a fascinating topic to me. And that's like one of the big strategies is, when you're feeling angry or sad or whatever, is like label it, like I'm feeling this way. And then I like that you add in like a part of me is feeling this way, because you're getting out even more of identifying with whatever it is. I feel like every cognitive behavioral therapist is like jumping up and down and clapping that you just said that right now, because how you talk to yourself is important, and like little subliminal things when you talk to yourself can reinforce a direction either way. So if you I don't know, whatever it might be, an example, it's like you're bad at some issue or something, right? It's like if you're telling yourself, oh, I messed up, I'm so bad at piano, or I'm so bad at like having conversations with certain people about certain things. Well, inherently in that is you're labeling yourself as bad at that thing, right? But a better way to say it, or a more healthy way to say it, might be, until now, I've been not as good as I would have liked to have been at this thing, right? But it's a very subtle but important difference, right? And so, yeah, I like the aspect of that you're going down labeling it and, kind of having that conversation with yourself. But again, it goes back to like, are you aware of, where your mind is and your emotions? And that's half the battle. Or maybe even more. And I think that's the hardest part.
Well, I always view it as, the first step is to become aware of it, sure. But then at least for me, like how my brain just works, and this goes back to my love for psychology and spirituality and mental health, I always say, okay, that's the pinprick of it. What's under that? Why am I like that? And that's where, the personal work, the working with, whether it be a therapist or a coach or in communities, that I love let's dive into this.
Yeah.
Let's try to figure this out. And, I've participated in plant medicine to support me through that on retreats. I've gone, 8-day silent meditation retreats where you're not talking, down to, men's weekends where it's just like men talking about their feelings. I love that. I'm addicted to that work, actually. I want to just go deeper and deeper. It's like very few people could tell me something that I'm like, I love hearing different perspectives about my life. That's what I love talking about. But there's very few times where people are like, do you think or do this sort of thing? I'm like, no, I know. I've gone deep and I can tell you why I do that.
I've done it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's awesome.
Well, I want to go back to a question I asked earlier. What are some of the things that you do, my friend, to support yourself from a mental health way? How are you holding yourself accountable? I love that example of until now. That is one great frame right there. But what else?
Until now, I'm not great at that one, but I try.
Yeah, love it. Meta, very meta of you.
So things I do, I think for me, there's kind of like the baseline things. One of the, highest correlated things with, happiness, so to speak, is gratitude, right? And so I try to every morning, think of something, that you're grateful for. And there's a lot of ways to do that, actually. And I think like I, at one point, struggled with like, I would feel grateful for things, but it was almost like I didn't really connect with it. It's like, I'm grateful for this, but I, didn't quite feel it. But what you can do for that is like, imagine like you're grateful for it, but imagine if it wasn't there. If you didn't have this at all, you're grateful for your family. Well, okay, that in the abstract, I understand that, but then imagine if you didn't have your family, right? So that's one thing that I'm really big on. And I try to be grateful too for things that are, the absence of certain things, which is kind of hard to do as well. It's like, if you're not waking up every day in chronic pain, well, it's not really on your mind to be grateful for not having chronic pain, right? But for those who have chronic pain, they will tell you like it is one of the worst things on the entire planet to experience. Being grateful for things that don't like, proving a negative, so to speak, are hard to do, but I try to do the kind of grateful practice. I try to meditate at least once a day. I'm really big on that. Which if you're interested or you're listening to this, hopefully you get interested in that. Waking Up is an application that on your phone that I started using for that. And they kind of start you off by teaching you how to meditate, so to speak. And then you can use that. Some of it's guided, but that's really good. I find that really was really helpful to kind of get me started on it. And then the final thing that I'm really big on is journaling. I feel like journaling really helps you get your thoughts out. Even things you didn't even know you wanted to talk about, right? That were kind of locked inside your head. I think but those are the big three that I do. I try to do them consistently. And whenever I'm feeling bad, I kind of look back and realize like, well, I've fallen off on a couple of those. That's probably why. So pick it back up, get back into it.
You're inspiring me to get more into gratitude because I don't do that nearly enough. Like one of the things that I, recently learned from my mother is she said, before you say your prayers at night, just say, what are 3 things you're grateful for from the day? And you end up going to bed. Great. And I think the gratitude practice, I love your frame of imagine if you didn't have it. Like that almost sent like a punch in my stomach a little bit. It was like, oh, like didn't have my family. Oh my God, I'm so freaking grateful for them.
Right.
If I didn't have my health, oh my God, I'm so grateful for that. If I didn't have my best friend CJ from growing up, man, I'm grateful for CJ. People along those lines and those things, I think that's so powerful. I one time did a 100-day gratitude channel. I think it was called Shift. Got run by a guy named Tony Childs. And he would do this course. It was like a weekly thing, but every single morning you had to read this journal, thing. And it was the same thing every day. And essentially you just go through, I'm grateful for, and there's like one of the things it would say, I'm grateful for my ears that I can hear. I'm grateful for my legs that I can walk, my hands that I could hold. And you're required to say it out loud. And each day there was a different journal prompt on that you had to write about something that you're grateful for. And, initially, like it was like 7 days, 20 days, whatever it was in. And I was like, this is cool, but like, I guess it's like taking time. And I still remember I'm driving home from work one day and I'm listening to a podcast. I think I'm listening to the Rich Roll podcast. It was like one of my favorites. And he said something really powerful. And I'm just like, damn, I'm grateful for my ears so I can listen to this podcast.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's funny. Yeah. And I feel like at some point, this is probably why you fall off. That like you get like you only have a finite amount of energy and time in the day, right? And at some point, they kind of feel like chores, or you start to fall off of it. I forget where I was reading this. It was like Thich Nhat Hanh or something, like one of those books. But he said something like, try to meditate for 10 and 20 minutes every day. If you feel like you don't have the time to do that, then meditate. You need to meditate for an hour. Mm-hmm. So it was really fascinating. But yeah, no, I love that story that you told. It's good.
So how do you journal? What do you journal on? Is it just like whatever's kind of top of mind, or?
Yeah, I used to do like, I used to have like some templates that I would do, because apparently I'm like, have to organize everything. It's funny. One of my co-founders, like our brains think very differently, which I love. We butt heads a lot, but we always end up in a better spot because of it. And, but I'm like super organized and he's, less so, but we've kind of met in the middle. But yeah, I used an app called Day One, because apparently I use an app to do everything, which is a really cool journaling app. And you can create templates and things that you want to go in there. So I used to have kind of like a daily template, a weekly template, but now I kind of just have tried to, I guess, give myself more space, so to speak, on what and how I'm doing it. Because I feel like the flip side of being hyper efficient focused and hyper, I guess, templatized, that helps you in the sense of you can get more done every day. But the flip side of that is you don't necessarily change what you do every day and kind of experience new things or write new things. Because the best way to be efficient is to create some kind of schedule, right, and just really nail it every day. So I try to like actively fight my side that does that personally, but apparently in journaling now too. So I kind of just open it up and just start writing. And then if it's ever one of those things, that you feel like you don't have anything to write about, just start writing that I don't have anything to write about. And usually it just flows from there. So you can get to some interesting spots from that.
I want to touch on something you said. Especially, I'm assuming, being a CEO, as a sales leader myself, or even as a sales professional when I was, your days have to be linear, right? They have to be, okay. Especially I think of like a sales call, right? Okay, I have to set a powerful pre-frame. I need to set the agenda. I need to ask, good discovery questions. And then I need to give my pitch of here's the trends we're seeing, the problems we solve, and here's what our solution is. There's a very specific framework about how to do that. And then also I look at my calendar and, certain days I'm playing Tetris, trying to figure out where I can actually even put things. 'Cause it's so back to back to back. And what I crave really, the most is, I still remember I went to an 8-day meditation retreat, I think I mentioned earlier. And one of the mottos at the very beginning of each day is space and the awareness of space. Meditation is space and the awareness of space. And I found it so profound, like such a meaningful phrase. And I look at my calendar and I'm like, there's very few places to allow for space and awareness of the space.
Right.
And that's just one thing that I hope that, that's something I'm learning right now about how do I, allow myself to have direction and drive towards a specific area and just sit back and almost be in a state of meditation at all times. Like right now I can tap into a state of meditation, but
right.
How can you get moment to moment?
Right. Yeah. That's crazy hard. That's crazy hard. I feel like I was talking to someone about that and they said, try to have hooks throughout the day that you can kind of reset and get back into the moment. But yeah, something you said earlier too, or just now, that I'm fascinated by is like, you get so busy, right? You get so busy, you almost forget. It's like you get so busy in the day, you forget to even think about how busy you are in the day. Like it's just kind of like your day just blends together and you're at the end of the day, like, wow, what did I even do today? Because it was too much to even like manage. And what I found that was happening to a lot of sales organizations, I feel like too, is you get so busy and your brain is so full and you're doing so many things at once. You're doing everything at 70% of how good you could be doing it if you just slowed down and really gave yourself the space to think about it and be creative about it. And I guess, be present with whatever that task is. And like a lot of times I feel like in sales organizations, for example, you're going to a presentation, right? And instead of, stopping and thinking about the company you're working with or the problem that they have or the way that you can solve it or the value in you helping them solve it, you end up just rushing and grabbing, whatever templates out there from a spreadsheet or from a PowerPoint that one of your peers did or you used on a different deal. And you kind of like change the logos and repurpose it. And, now you're off and running, right? But you haven't slowed down to really think about, okay, this is a different company, a different deal, a different problem, in a similar space as some of the other deals. But yeah, you get so busy and there's so little time to do it. And you just feel like there's never enough time. So you take and try to be most efficient and pull the template, right? When if you just slowed down and, were thoughtful about it, you'll probably get in a lot better space. And sometimes you'll probably even figure out that some of the busy work you're doing, like you don't even need to do it because there's a way to, shortcut and get around that item. But and I'm still trying to figure that out from, starting a company. There's never enough time. There's, constant prioritization of what to be doing. But then it's like, how do you create space for the people you work with and the employees that ultimately will come onto your company to slow down and have that creativity and have the ability to, innovate even how they're doing things or whether they should be doing things, right? So something I'm fascinated with, and I think maybe Google or some of the companies did these in kind of like code camps, but I'm interested as we grow as a company, like can we almost like schedule or force some of our employees to like slow down and spend some time or spend some moments just really thinking about, okay, what would I do differently or better? Or, if I had, infinite things to do or I could do anything, like what would that look like? Like you're not allowed to work on your typical day. You're not allowed to do any of that. Like from a business perspective, right? I feel like a lot of like coding has been working with that. Like, hey, here's a weekend. We're going to work on a project, like things called like a hackathon or whatever it might be. But I feel like from a business perspective, like in the, other spots, like, HR, operations, sales, like there's so much opportunity. I feel like there's like Workday, for example, was a concentration of sales reps that were absolutely incredible. Like some of the best sales talent I've ever been a part of. But if you like give them more time and space to be creative, I feel like you'd be in such a better spot, but it's just so hard to do because everyone's so overworked. So yes, I feel like we said earlier, like slowing down and giving yourself the space and being aware of where you're in is hard to do, but it'd be interesting if you could help people do that in your organization.
First off, the space there. If we don't have enough space, like if you say like just slow down, essentially, just slow down and it'll be better. We literally don't have time. Like we're too back to back. There's too many things. It's, partially because if we allow people just to stop and be in a state of creativity, at the end of the day, it's not working towards this very singular goal as a company.
Right.
And everybody starts to kind of drift off and have their own ideas. And I'm not saying that stuff is not unbelievably valuable, because some of the best ideas come from that, but working towards the same company is, or the same goal is really hard. The second thing I would say is I love the change, not just change the logos on the PowerPoint, but actually think about what's going on with their business. That's so good right there. And starting to even use their phrases and to put yourself in their shoes and think about things the way that they are thinking about things.
Right.
But to also not say, like, one of the things that I am very much about is I'm an over preparer at times.
I see.
It's like, okay, I need to really make sure this is good, and just the prep. There could be over preparation to the point where it's because you don't trust yourself. It's because I don't trust myself. Just show up and be naturally good enough to know and to trust that when somebody asks me a question or something is happening, I will naturally know the answer.
Right.
And there's a fine line right there between the two.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting, and that's something like I feel like in sales, I guess this is getting on back to the topic of like slowing down and really thinking about their business. I think that's one of the things, like when we started Sift, that I thought was a really big problem is like you're so busy and you're working on so many things. One, just all the data out there, like even if there's in sales, there's a million different systems, right? Which is kind of the problem. But even getting the data on your accounts or whatever company you want to focus on is incredibly challenging, right? Like you can go, think about the process of, hey, here's your accounts and territory and your number. Well, I need to do a couple of things where I can get to even talking to them, right? I need to go in here. I need to, research them all. I need to then go, based on that research, figure out a way to prioritize them, get them into some kind of territory organization plan, which people use, spreadsheets, whatever. I probably have extended teams to go collaborate on it. And then from there, it's ultimately go and take all of this, that you had in the beginning, and then go build some kind of value perspective or value messaging, for your accounts, right? And that process, what should be a relatively, seamless horizontal process of, hey, here's my accounts, all the way to here's my value message on why it makes sense for my company to work with these accounts, and scaling that to all of your different potential prospects. That's what we're really trying to do with Sift. And that comes back to every company essentially is unique, right? It's about what problem do they have and what solution do we have that can solve that problem? And then what's the value in doing that? Which there's so many things that distract you from getting ultimately to that core goal or core messaging of slowing down and why am I working with this company? I feel like if you can do that and do that at scale, you take away a lot of the things that distract you from ultimately what sales is, right? Which is you have a problem, you have a solution, you have value in solving it, and you have people come together to do that. And so I think that's kind of what we're trying to automate at Sift in general, is that process, right? Take away, it's not about the data, right? It's not about going and collecting all this stuff and researching accounts. That's just a means to an end to get to where you want, right? Which is value selling. How do we bring value to these companies, the problems we can solve? And that's what we want to automate and generate that value messaging for our customers, so they can take it ultimately to their potential customers, right? And then you take a lot of the busy work and a lot of the things that are really not important ultimately to what you want to do in problem solving, and you can get the focus back to the problem solving, right? And then kind of everyone wins, which I know sounds kind of kumbaya, but I am passionate about that because I have kind of a love-hate relationship with sales. And so, but I think ultimately, if you refocus sales back on the problem, solution value set, so to speak, and give yourself the space to really focus on that instead of just grabbing some spreadsheet template or whatever it might be, or PowerPoint template and rinsing and repeating it. A lot of really great things can happen in that kind of potential future, which is something that I really want to work towards building with Sift. Mm-hmm.
I love how you tied that back of Sift is actually helping exactly what I was just saying, to allow people to be more creative, i.e. do the problem solving, and to automate a certain part of the stuff that says, hey, you don't need to think about this stuff. This stuff is at least the beginning stages of, and the crafting of it, the value messaging, tailoring it, all that does solve a serious problem. And it allows spaciousness and the awareness of it, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it gets back to, like every company is unique, but I feel like in sales, like it comes down, I call it the like spreadsheet double sort, right? When you're trying to make a territory plan, you get a spreadsheet of accounts and you go in and you sort it descending by employees and then descending by revenue. And that's where you start, right? Where like no one buys this, a product because I'm, 20,000 employees and I have 4 billion in revenue. They buy a product because they have a certain, business problem, and there's a certain solution that can solve it, and there's a value that triangulates all of it. But that's, at scale for a salesperson hard to get to. So if you can automate essentially presenting all of those things to a salesperson as they're trying to go add value to one of their customers, which is really nowadays the only way to sell, and those who aren't doing it, I feel like are going to fall behind, is coming in with a perspective on the value we can bring. And that takes so much time to do. So if you can if you can automate it, hey, based on all the things we have about this company, here's the problem that they likely have, and viewing it from a lens of what, our potential customers can do to solve that problem. You can say, hey, here's the problem they likely have. Here's how your solution aligns to that problem, and here's the value in you guys working together. You can do 80 or 90% of the value alignment, and then you can free up space and time for those reps to be able to go in there and really start to add value, right? Because they have a better understanding of the problem and solution and the value that they bring, and they can do it, at scale in their accounts, which is really what hurts you. Like the best reps in top 1%. That's what they're doing. They can just only do it for 5 accounts at a time at most, right? When they know what they need to be doing across all of them, there's just no time. So if you can automate as much of that as possible, I feel like it's somewhere that is really fascinating and really interesting that we can improve on. And then, from there, selling obviously is fundamentally changing with the technologies like GPT-3. And just how sales has been working, from a sense of a lot of vendors, unfortunately, just blast out messaging with some of these really powerful tools like Outreach, which I think you're very familiar with over here. And they're kind of can become tone deaf, right? And that hurts the buyers and the sellers, right? The sellers, like there's so many resources that go into sending out that messaging, whether or not the person has the problem. And then the buyers, I think everyone will tell you now, like, look at your inbox and there's 1,000 emails that really have nothing to do with the problem you might have. So there's a lot of inefficiency on both sides. But if you can start to, at scale, look at, what's the problems companies have, and then what solutions can come and solve those problems and then match them, which is what we call at Sift the value match. That's ultimately longer term where we want to get, is we can start to match companies based on problem solution sets and then automate the process around all of that. But it starts with core understanding the problem and solution value chain, which is where we are today, and how to automate a lot of those things.
Yeah, that sounds really powerful. Coming in with a perspective already of how specifically your solution can solve their specific problems based on who, what, and where they are. All of that.
Right.
All right, man. I'll take a demo. You sold me, man. It took Almost an hour into this podcast, and I'm in. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, hey, listen, we're getting up to the top of the hour, man. I love where this conversation has gone. I feel like we've talked about, not just one, but a few of my favorite things around leadership, around mental health, especially, and around sales. So thank you for the journey of taking us there. I have one final question that I ask all my guests. And before I get to it, man, I just first want to acknowledge you for showing up here on this call, starting your own company, being a thought leader when it comes to how organizations go to market, and also your focus and diligence on mental health and how important that is. I love your vision too of the one day being able to give your team more of those, times to be creative as well. And that just shows the type of person, the type of leader you are. So thank you for being you, I guess. My final ask is this, man. This podcast is called the Rising Leader Podcast. From your perspective, what is the rising leader, or what type of leader is rising and needed in this world?
I don't know. I think it's a combination of a certain vision that you see in the world that you want to help create or impact, and then how do you want to gather a team or support people that can share that vision, and then how do you think about how can you be the best version of yourself for those people as well and get them to where they want to go. I think that's the important. I guess it comes down to intent, right? How can you combine a vision and the business aspects of where you want to go with the emotional and personal component of ultimately companies are aggregations of people, right? And how do you triangulate those things ultimately to get both your organization and people to where you need to go at this some vision. So and I think it all comes down to intent. How can you better support people and figure out what it is that they want to do and how they want to get, and be intentional about that. I think the rest of it kind of falls into place from there. It's kind of a rambling answer to your question, because I don't think there's a set. I feel like it looks different for everyone, but it all comes down to intent, right? Mm. Which I guess sounds fluffy, but I think the intent aspect is important, and not disregarding the emotional component of wanting the best for the people you're with. I think those are the most important pieces from my perspective on a good leader, and then of course acting on it, right? Without the action piece, you can have the best intent, but nothing really gets done. So showing up with actions where your intent and words are, I think that's where the magic is. But I'll get back to you, once I grow.
No, man, I love that answer, man. I want to just phrase that in my own way, which I love. It's being in alignment in terms of your actions, your thoughts, the ways you go about things, in alignment with, you call it intent, I call it your greater why, the thing beyond just yourself. And when you can get a group of people in alignment with your greater why, which is hopefully, and when it's your true why, it's coming, I believe, from that sweet spot, that spot that means truly well. And if you can do that, that is the rising leader, and to be in rapport with that version of yourself. So, dog, I'll take that answer for sure.
I think you might have said that one better. Definitely more succinctly. So no, I love that. Yeah.
You just had to go first, so I could my own way. Yeah. All right. Hey, Lee, Brother, I appreciate this, man. This was like wonderful, Jamin. I feel like I could have gone like 3 hours here with you.
Yeah.
Next
Same.
time I'm in Austin, man, I'm for sure hitting you up. And yeah, thanks for being on the show. And for all those listeners who joined the Rising Leader podcast, thank you. And Lee, talk to you soon, brother. Thanks for listening to the Rising Leader podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you get notified every time a new episode releases. If you know someone who wants to take their lives and their career to the next level, send them this episode so we can all rise together. For more information, check out alluviance.co. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, keep letting it flow.